Hi guys, welcome again. I hope you are doing good. In this video I will discuss about difference between proxy and non-proxy integration in the API gateway. Non-proxy integration is also known as custom integration. I will also show a demo to understand the difference in this video. So let us get started. So what is proxy integration? In the proxy integration, entire client request including the query parameters, headers and body is forwarded to the backend service. The response from the backend service is sent back to the client without any modifications at the API gateway level. The backend service is responsible for handling the complete request, including parsing, processing and generating the response. Proxy integration is suitable for simple use cases where the backend service can directly handle the incoming request without any need of additional processing or transformation at the API gateway level. This offers simplicity, but more logic is to be implemented in the backend service. Now let us understand what is non-proxy integration. In non-proxy integration, API gateway can perform transformations on the incoming request and outgoing response before forwarding them to the backend service. As I told previously, non-proxy integration is also known as custom integration. Non-proxy integration allows more fine-grained control over the request and response processing. So how it allows more fine-grained control? As in the non-proxy integration, we can transform the incoming request, body or headers, and also can customize those at the API gateway level. So it allows us more fine-grained control over the request and response. We can define mappings that transform the incoming request and map it to the format expected by the backend service. We can also configure the response mappings to transform the backend response before sending it to the client. As we talked earlier, it is not possible in proxy integration. In proxy, the request and response to and from the backend service are forwarded as is. Non-proxy integrations are often used when integrating with external services or systems where the data format needs to be adapted to the expectations of the external system. This is one example. Now let us go to the next slide and see the differences between proxy and non-proxy integration. We will see a comparison here. So the first thing is entire request is sent to the backend service without intermediate processing by the API gateway. And in non-proxy, requests can be transformed and customized before at API gateway before forwarding it to the backend service. In proxy, backend response is sent back to the client as is, whereas in non-proxy, backend response can be transformed at API gateway. Then another point is, in proxy, the setup is simple and it is suitable for use cases where minimal processing is needed at the API gateway level. Whereas in non-proxy, more configuration options may lead to increased complexity but provides flexibility for customization and transformations at the API gateway level. Then in proxy, we have limited control over adapting data from format for external systems, whereas in non-proxy we have more control over adapting data format for third-party integrations. In proxy, we have consistency across APIs, which relies on backend service to handle transformations consistently. Whereas in non-proxy, we have centralized control, which allows for consistent transformations across multiple APIs. In proxy, basic validation may be handled by the backend service, whereas in non-proxy, more options for request validation and error handling are available within API gateway. Proxy may not be as adaptable to changing API requirements, whereas non-proxy is adaptable to evolving requirements with centralized control at the API gateway level. Now, proxy integration is suitable for simple APIs quick setups, or scenarios where backend service can handle raw requests effectively. Whereas non-proxy integration is suitable for scenarios requiring complex transformations, validations, or interactions with external services. So this is the difference between proxy and non-proxy integration. To summarize, we can say that proxy integration may be sufficient for simple use cases, while non-proxy offers additional customization and control over the API, making it suitable for more complex and specific requirements. Let us now understand the difference between proxy and non-proxy integration with a simple demo in AWS console. Like we have been saying that in proxy integration, the request is forwarded to the backend as is without any transformation at API gateway level, and in non-proxy we can transform and customize the request. So let us understand this difference through a demo. What do we mean by sending the request as is and transforming the request at the API gateway level? So let me switch to my AWS console now. I am in my AWS console now. Let us go to API gateway. Create a new REST API. Create resource. Let us say insert user. Create method. Post. Integration type Lambda. Choose the Lambda function. Here you can see this toggle button which is off. So by default this will be a non-proxy integration. So in our API I will add a query parameter, customer ID. And in the integration request I want to transform this query parameter. So at the end you will see this mapping template where we can transform our query parameter to something else. As per our requirement, we can do any transformations here. So I have written a sample transformation code in which what I am doing is this customer ID. This is the parameter that we will be getting in our REST API. In this parameter, I am adding a prefix cust_. So the backend Lambda function will get the customer ID with this prefix. This language of this template is known as Apache Velocity Template language. You can learn more about it from the link provided here. So let us deploy this API. And in the backend Lambda, let us print the event object that we will be getting from API gateway, and let me return customer ID here. Now let us invoke this URL. Insert user. So in the customer ID I am giving this value 12345. So in the response you can see the value that we got is cust_12345. So this prefix was added by the mapping template at the API gateway level. So if you see in our Lambda function, we didn't do any code changes or didn't do any processing here. And if we see the logs for this Lambda function, you can see the input that we got from the API gateway was customer ID with this prefix. So in this way we can transform our query parameters at the API gateway level in this integration request. Similarly, the response that we are getting from the Lambda function, we can also transform that request at the API gateway level before giving it back to the client. So let us see an example. Suppose here also we have this mapping template. So in the mapping template we can transform the response. So in my example, what I am doing is I am replacing this CUST underscore with processed underscore in the response. So let us try this out. So here you can see in the response we got processed underscore prefix with the customer ID. So in this way we saw in the non-proxy integration we can transform the request and response at the API gateway level. Now let us see the proxy integration. Let me add a new resource here. Insert user1. Create method, post, enable this to Lambda proxy now. Add the query parameters. Now here in the integration request, if we go to its settings, you can see there is no option to transform the query parameters. Similarly, in the integration response, you can see proxy integrations cannot be configured to transform responses. So now let us deploy this API and we will test it. Let us invoke this API. Internal server error. Okay. So in the Lambda backend we had printed this event. So let us check the event now. What value we got in this event. So in the event, now what we have got is we have got this whole request as is from the API gateway, and inside this request you can see a query string parameter with customer ID 12345. So in case of proxy integration, if you need to do any transformations with your query string, you will have to do inside this function. So let us return this response in a correct way. So to fetch the customer ID, we need to fetch it like this: event query string parameters and then get customer ID. So now we got the customer ID as 12345. And we can't do any transformations at the API gateway level. So if you need to do any transformations, you have to do in the backend function only. So this was the main difference between proxy and non-proxy integrations. I hope you understood the difference, and if you like the video, please hit the like button, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please leave those in the comment box. And if you have not already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. Thank you.